So we need 1 egg yolk. So for the egg yolk, when we are working with 100, 200, we really have to save the egg whites. I'm going to keep this right here. I have AP flour, right? All-purpose flour. Why AP flour? I use bread flour for pate choux. Bread flour you use when you need structure. You really have to have good gluten. AP flour, you don't need that much structure, okay? It is a container after all. It's not something that you're serving the pie dough. You're serving what's inside, right? The pie dough has to be right as well, and has to be right for the function. So if I'm baking like a quiche that has a lot of eggs and it really has to, be baked before, it's nicer to have something like this when I have caramelization going and a little egg yolk. It means that it gives me a more flexible dough. If I have a harder dough, always the flour has to have little or less protein than bread flour. So sablage is when I work my flour with my butter and reduce the pieces of butter into a sablé or like sand, very little. Let's just break this a little bit. Butter always cold, because if I'm using warm butter, when I start mixing in, I will really lose it because I'm going to start developing gluten, because I'm giving what flour likes. Flour likes humidity to start forming gluten. So that's why we have a less forming gluten flour, and we have to have the very cold butter cut into cubes. You don't have to be as big as this, but about this size is good, okay? So you don't have to be there working forever. So I'm just working with the tips of my fingers until I find all the pieces to be uniform and completely inside my flour, okay? The pate brisée we are making later is going to be a little different, because the pate brisée needs a bigger pieces of butter, because I want a little more flakiness. The difference between sablé and brisée being only the flakiness. Actually, it is the flakiness and the size of the butter. And also, sometimes the brisée most of the time calls for water, and the sablé sometimes calls for milk, maybe a little egg yolk, maybe 1 egg. It gives it a little lighter. It's not as flaky. So flaky dough means cold butter and cold water, okay? And you can use it at any production. All depends what you have inside. If you're par baking it, or if you are baking like apples, raw apples, they take a long time to bake. Or if you're baking maybe like a pumpkin pie or something with a lot of eggs that will coagulate very fast, you don't have to bake as long. All depends on the use. All depends on what you're making. If I'm making like a pâte feuillette, the puff pastry, I really have a lot of use for puff pastry. Pretty much everything that we're going to be making tonight, I could just be making with puff pastry. Okay, it's very versatile. It's very, very decent. It's very bland. Okay, the difference between buying puff pastry, we just can go to the supermarket and buy it, right? I don't know if you guys bought it before, but some people do. If you buy it, it comes in a frozen section, and if you read the label, um, it's really not all butter. Okay, they use plastic fat or modified fat or shortening or something that is not as healthy. Yeah, they are vegetable oils, except for the ones that they will say lard or something or animal fat. Most of the time, no, because nowadays it's more expensive to have lard. We don't produce a lot of lard. We kill a lot of porks, but we don't, use a lot of lards. So lard is not, present in every pastry shop anymore. Before it was basically just lard. So animal fat from butter. So I just work my dough completely. You see, I have still pieces of butter, almost completely broken. Every time that I'm working with flour and a liquid, the liquid will always serve to hydrate. So if I have two different ingredients that are liquid by definition, like eggs, right? I will always start with the egg, and then I will go for my other liquid. What a boo-boo. So I will always do the egg first, and instead of milk, it could be water. So again, I don't have to be fixing the water. I have to be fixing, hydrating the flour. So there we go. We have the egg completely inside the dough. And now I'm going to adjust the consistency just with a little bit of milk. You don't want the dough to be too soggy. You don't want it to be too firm. You want always to make a cold dough. When you finish mixing the dough, it should be cold. The temperature of the dough should be cold. Especially if you're just working with butter. You're not working with lard or, anything else or a shortening. So this should make me about 3. So if you want to divide into 3, all depends on what you're making. I always like to finish my dough and open a little bit, ready to be completely open. So something like this, right? And then we have more dough. So we're going to wrap it and leave it in the fridge. 1 hour could be perfect, okay? Okay, so now we are finishing the quiche. We can use this dough for empanada. It's great. Any dough that has a little addition of egg yolk or a little milk, it is extra fat. It makes the dough a little more pliable, and it gives it a texture that is not necessarily flaky, but it's richer and very light. So it's nice for a quiche. So quiche, we should par bake, I could say. So I'll open the dough. One time, just because I have pieces of butter still, I will sort of do one little fold. And I will open just like I did open the puff pastry. So a little more flour. And just open it. I have a better dough. Always cold. I'm working on marble. If you want to keep the plastic in the bottom, just like I started, it's better. It's not as much cleaning after cooking. So again, about 1 inch. We don't want this to be too thick. So this is all. So most of the doughs, we started making doughs to just have something inside. So this is just holding whatever liquid we have. So again, we're going to be doing this. I always like to bake my pies with a little protection or ventilation, so I will not burn the bottom, or it's not going to get as soggy. Okay, that might help me sometimes so much that I don't even have to par bake my dough, even though it's a nice idea to par bake your dough. Par bake means, in this case for quiche, I don't even par bake. I bake the dough completely until it's golden brown, and then I will pour my liquid in my filling. So just have the excess off. We made this too already, I believe. Yep. So again, when we are making different pie doughs, remember, it's always a good idea to first freeze it before you bake it so it doesn't shrink as much. And if you're par baking, high temperature, 400 degrees, because butter, when you're baking with butter, if you let the butter melt, will shrink. And you're going to have a very soggy final product. We don't want that. So this, we should par bake it for about, I could say, about 10 minutes or so on 400 degrees. And then I'm going to pour the appareil on top. Every liquid that we have in a recipe that has to be made apart is called appareil. So we have appareil with almonds and milk and heavy cream and eggs, or we have, in this case, the appareil for the quiche. So we're going to get 4 eggs. 4 whole eggs. Just be sure that you don't have pieces of shells inside of eggs. And 2 egg yolks. A little bit of salt and pepper. Mix that very well. Until you just break it. You have to season your custard. So even if you have cheeses that are a little salty or bacon or something, remember that you have something else that's salty, but you also have to salt the milk mixture and the eggs. So just mix everything together very well, and you're done. So you're gonna get all your ingredients for your quiche, whatever you're using, Gruyere, bacon, whatever. You're gonna spread on top of your par-baked pie dough, and you're gonna finish with the apanado. The apanado is a custard, so it has to be baked at low temperature, maybe about 300 degrees for about 30 minutes or 35 minutes until it's completely set and it starts to form a little dome. Okay, so I opened the 2 quiche doughs and I'm gonna get some filling. I like to put my filling in the bottom. This is ham. It's gonna be ham and cheese. Lots of ham. Some people like it. And cheese. Oops. Wow. Got a little chunk of cheese in there, but it's okay. And I'm gonna add a little bit of cheese to the other one. That's gonna be mushroom. This is Gruyere, yes. You could have a little Parmesan cheese as well. It's a nice flavor. Well, Gruyere is the one that melts better without losing, its shape. The other cheese, some of them will melt completely, like they'll be almost liquid. And the Gruyere, it melts, but it has a very nice property. Yeah. So some mushroom that my friend Teixeira just did fresh tonight. Just saute with a little olive oil, spices. And there we go. Some liquid. Actually, a quiche is really an egg dish, It's a lot of eggs. Whatever else is just complementary because we're eating a lot of eggs. We're going to be baking this until it puffs. We have choices when we're baking. If my choice is to have a very creamy inside, my baking has to be slow. If my choice is to have the crust a little crispier, I have to bake at 350, okay? Just because I didn't par-bake the crust, I'm going to bake at 350 until I see that it forms a dome. So longer I bake eggs, more chances I have that the egg's gonna curd and break. So the protein, when it gets to some temperature, the protein that's holding it together will sort of explode and we start having some bleeding or some weeping the water out of the protein. So we don't want that to happen. If you see that some cake or some quiche or some cheesecake is exploded, make a tunnel, it means that the egg overcoagulate. Okay? The texture is a little grainy. We don't need that. So this, let's see, for about 40 minutes or so on 350 because I didn't par-bake.